I don't know if you guys caught this, but there were massive protests. And I don't know if you probably got the straight story on this because, there's been some cover trying to be run by one side of the aisle because, well, obviously it's attacking the heart of everything that they're trying to accomplish because massive protests happened in Cuba yesterday. And I'm not too sure. I heard a couple of reports that things were happening as well stateside when it comes to supportive protests. And I really hope if we're going to be continuing on from last year's protesting for a cause, rioting for a cause, we can transfer that same energy to trying to overthrow communism because that's what this was about, okay? Don't let other outlets fool you. That was the heart of this entire situation. Down with dictatorship. Thousands of Cubans demonstrate against communist regime. The regime is shutting off internet, says a Florida congresswoman. Yeah, I think they're about tired of living under the same dictatorial regime for 60, 70 years at this point, and still having to drive the same goddamn Yugo they've had since the late 60s. It's not a great place, okay? I've never personally been. I know I've spoken to some family friends who have made the trip down there, and they said that, yeah, the resorts are beautiful. And then outside of that, yeah, not so much, because guess what? Communism doesn't work. It never works. Unless, of course, you're trying to get rid of large swaths of the population, then it's a fantastic plan. But here we go. Thousands of Cubans took to the streets on Sunday in a number of cities to protest against human rights abuses, lack of freedom, and worsening economic situation in the communist-ruled country. Yeah, we really haven't been hearing much about Cuba for, oh my god, quite a while now at this point. The last time they made any big mainstream headlines, at least what's coming off the top of my head, is when Barack Obama went down there and visited with Castro's heir, hoping to, open up discussions, but then that just kind of seemed to cool off under Trump. I don't really know who dropped the ball in that situation, and it's really impossible to get a fair read out of it because, well, what's the mainstream narrative? Orange man bad whenever push comes to shove, right? So leave it up to the people. Videos uploaded to social media appear to show demonstrations in a number of towns and cities, including the capital Havana on Sunday. Protesters chanting in Spanish, obviously, said they weren't afraid of a regime led by Miguel Diaz-Canel and said they wanted access to COVID-19 vaccines and an end to the regime. I just put a little pin in that because we'll get back to it. Comes amid reports of gas, electricity, and vaccine shortages. What is this, fucking Cuba or Ontario? Across the Caribbean island nation, some analysts noted online that Sunday's demonstrations are the first time they have had protests at the government since the Melancanazo uprising of 1994, which prompted a number of Cubans to leave the country by boat to the United States. And now they're voting, which is leading to a strengthening GOP majority in Florida, where most, if not all of them, ended up. Shouts of down with the dictatorship, freedom, and homeland and life were also heard during the demonstrations, according to footage uploaded online. During different live broadcasts across Facebook, thousands of people can be seen marching through the streets in cities like San Antonio de los Baños, Tierra del Malena, and Alquiar, reported South Florida WTVJ. And yeah, we got a whole host of pictures here. Like bombed out streets. We don't know if that's what it was like after the protests or beforehand, but that's Havana. And some more aftermath. 57 people are missing or imprisoned in Cuba. Protests include artists, peace activists, and priests. Yeah, won't be hearing from them anymore. The Cuban pro-democracy group Cuba Decide confirmed the disappearances or arrest of 57 people since the protests erupted throughout the island on Sunday night. Many of them prominent critics of the communist regime. Cuba experienced a wave of protests nationwide on Sunday, affecting at least 20 localities from far west Pinar del Rio to Santiago de Cuba, the capital of the Oriente province. Reports estimate thousands took to the streets chanting freedom, all of the same ones that we already went over before. The Communist Party responded to the protests by calling for civil war, urging civilians to violently attack anyone participating in protests. Oh great, I'm sure this will end well. This is why we are calling all the revolutionaries in our country, all the communists, to go to the streets anywhere that these provocations are happening today, from now on through all these days. Miguel Diaz-Canel, the president of the country and face of the Castro regime, said in a televised address late Sunday on his state broadcaster. How fucking cute, right? It's a regime and, well, political ideology that's so goddamn successful, you have to, every 25 years, 27 years if we're going to be more accurate, gun down anybody who would want to protest against the great regime, because guess what? They can, because they took away all the guns, so they aren't going to be facing any opposition. Like I said, just after this stuff happened, the Biden administration claims Cuban anti-communist protests are about rising COVID cases and deaths. Yep, just trying to run cover for their fucking failed endpoint. Listen, we know that there are elected socialists in Congress right now. You got the entirety of the squad, obviously. Elizabeth Warren, look at her policies. Look at what she's pushing for. And you got Bernie Sanders. Oh, I'm an independent. No, fucking 40 years past your sell-by date. I'll take advice from you when you stop combing your hair with a stick of dynamite. President Joe Biden's administration responded to protests in Cuba against the communist regime on Sunday by issuing a statement through a minor official commending protests about rising COVID cases and deaths and medicine shortages. But I thought under, the healthcare that you want to put out there, Joe, under Biden Care, which is, what a horrific name. They have a great selection of shampoos and conditioners, but outside of that, not much else. Under healthcare, all of this, all so encompassing, you wouldn't have to worry about shortages or anything like that. No, it works swimmingly. It works perfectly across the world, right? It's a human right, after all, when you have to force somebody who goes to school in order to get a degree and you have to tell them what they have to do as mandated by the government. Yeah, that's definitely something that's a human right. You just treat the doctors and the nurses and all of the professionals like they're little pawns of the government. They don't get it. They're never going to get it. I don't think they even want to get it. On Sunday, protests broke out in Havana. Some activists called it the largest spontaneous popular protest since Fidel Castro took power in '59, with protesters openly denouncing the regime of Miguel Diaz-Canel. Julie Chung, acting assistant secretary of the United States Department of State Bureaus of Western Hemisphere Affairs. Oh my god, what kind of a fucking title is that? You are so inconsequential. You have to have how many qualifiers to whatever department you're working on, and you aren't even the top dog. You're the acting assistant secretary. Sucks to suck. Oh, but she said on Twitter, because, well, it's not like she has anything else to do. She has a fucking made-up job in a fictitious department. Their right to peacefully assemble to protest COVID and medicine shortages. It reads in full, peaceful protests are growing in Cuba. May I remind you of the bombed out streets? Okay, oh, right, these are Democrats we're dealing with, right? If the fire is only 75 feet high, it's still classified as peaceful. I forgot, sorry. Are growing in Cuba as the Cuban people exercise their right to peacefully assemble to express concern about rising COVID cases / deaths and medicine shortages. We commend the numerous efforts of the Cuban people mobilizing donations to help neighbors in need. Yeah, but when you're a communist dictatorship, I thought what happens is the government looks after everything and you wouldn't have to fundraise in order to, fund anything, because everything's looked after by Big Daddy government. And not even once did she mention anywhere in there about the failure of central planning, but that would run contrary to their never-ending praise of socialism and communism. So yeah, okay, that totally makes sense. And yeah, don't even bother mentioning any of those terms in there. The administration's statement ignored democracy and freedom altogether. Yeah, another two things. But to be fair, what could you expect from a fucking government that couldn't even get the second most absurd claim correct? You remember the Capitol Hill Lego set? Yeah, the Department of Justice erroneously mislabeled it. Yeah, no, they're bad, right? It wasn't even put together. So that whole using it to plan out the siege on the Capitol building, the insurrection, yeah, that wasn't even close to being right. They just took it because, I don't know, maybe somebody's kid's gonna get a kick out of it. But yeah, no, Biden had to come out and get somebody's pre-scripted fucking rhetoric to go out there and say, hear their people. Biden calls on Cuban communist regime to listen to protesters. But don't worry, in communist Cuba, government tells the people. I wouldn't anticipate Biden helping out the population down there, so I don't know how this one ends. President Biden said on July 12th that the Cuban communist regime should respect the rights of its people amid historic demonstrations, coming a day after thousands of protesters took to the streets in several cities demanding greater freedoms and an end to the regime. The Cuban people are bravely asserting fundamental and universal rights, those rights including the rights to peaceful protests, and the right to freely determine their own future must be respected, Biden said in a statement released by the White House. So did he say it or did the White House release it? Because those are always two different things. United States calls on the Cuban regime to hear their people and serve their needs at this vital moment rather than enriching themselves. Clearly, don't follow my lead, okay? But unless Biden's statement said anything else, yeah, he once again also, just like Assistant Secretary Chung said, yeah, it's basically about medicine and the lack thereof, not addressing any of the underlying causes. And yeah, it looks like Biden didn't do the same either. So whatever. What do you expect? What do you expect? And then you get the exact same stock rhetoric out of the Republican side because, yeah, no, this is an opportunity to take a pot shot across the aisle, so why not take it, right? Nothing's going to get solved at the end of the day. From Ted Cruz, the American people stand squarely with the men and women of Cuba in their noble fight for liberty, and the Biden administration must unequivocally and forcefully tell the world as much immediately, but they won't because he'll forget what he needs to do. We'll say that somebody needs to keep an eye on that Pol Pot character because he looks like he could be a touch too deadly for his liking. Senator Marco Rubio said that the administration should have spoken sooner. Thanks, Marco. Where'd you find your spine all of a sudden? Oh, right, that's you got an upcoming election cycle. What did Trump have to say? I stand with the Cuban people. Backing the protesters calling for liberation from communism in Cuba, the former President Donald Trump issued a reminder of Biden's administration reversing his Cuban policies and calling on President Joe Biden to stand up against communism. Oh, we're going to get some clarification. Sweet. I stand with the Cuban people 100% in their fight for freedom, Trump wrote in a statement to Save America PAC on Monday afternoon. The government must let them speak and be free, unlike my government, which likes to deplatform me. Joe Biden must stand up to the communist regime, or history will remember. The Cuban people deserve freedom and human rights. They are not afraid. Trump noted the protests abruptly stopped in Cuba. I wonder why and how, remarking on the oppressive regime's silencing of freedoms and speech, much like he has denounced from big tech and the liberal mainstream media in America. Thanks, Newsmax. Trump also rebuked Biden reversing his administration's very tough stance on Cuba while reminding Americans former President Barack Obama, who Biden served as vice president, wow, I forgot, being more like Joe, was not only soft on Cuba but welcoming. Yes, very much so. Don't forget that Biden and the Democrats campaigned on reversing my very tough stance on Cuba, Trump's statement continued, remembering when Obama attended baseball games with Castro's. Well, they imprisoned, beat, and killed the Cuban people. Yep. But that's the way that Obama handled every face-to-face meeting. He was just a sycophant. You remember his first year in office, he just went around on the big old apology tour, collected his Nobel Peace Prize, and then just circled back to the White House, hopped on the joysticks, and bombed the fuck out of some brown people in the Middle East. But he was nice in person. Oh yeah, no, I'm sure he's a pisser to hang out with at a baseball game. But really, to steal a Trumpism, him and Biden are just politicians. That's it, okay? Speak out of one side of your mouth, and then follow it up with speaking out of the other side of your mouth. Like, it's so patently obvious what's happening here. So we'll see where this goes, and perhaps we'll do a little bit more research into the Cuban president himself, but this video is getting a little bit long, and there's a lot more information coming out, so I'd love to follow this up, because I would definitely love for Cuba to be a successful island nation, because there's no reason there shouldn't be. They have a bunch of natural resources that they can export, and more importantly, the people there deserve to be free and not live under communism. I think that's fairly fair to say, right? But from Cuba now, we'll take a little, northwestern little jog, and we'll catch up on what's happening in Texas, because they also had a weekend. They had a little shindig down there of a bunch of boomer cons getting together and holding their version of CPAC, and Texas's Attorney General is, he's making moves. So let's touch base with the Lone Star State. With that said, I thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.